What was portrayed today was the Battle of Williamsburg. That was one of the first battles in the Peninsula Campaign when George McClellan came around behind Richmond, Virginia, and went from the east to the west, basically coming up Yorktown, Williamsburg. He's heading west towards Richmond, Virginia. Now, he did get a bit of a start on the Confederate Army under Joe Johnson. So the commander at Williamsburg, Prince John Magruder, was an actor. Here comes a huge Union army, and they needed to stall for time. Prince John took his army and marched them back and forth, up and down, dug trenches, had bugle calls at different places, drum calls at different places. He made his 5,000 or so soldiers look like 50,000. McClellan comes up and sees this huge army that's all a fiction, and he settles down to basically siege Williamsburg. He spends a long time doing something that he could have done in one day. They slowly moved up towards Williamsburg and then attacked it, but by the time they got there, the Confederate Army backed up. The significance was that it gave Joe Johnson, the Confederate commander, time to bring his army. It's confusing. His army was called the Army of the Potomac, and they changed the name within a couple of weeks. Gave that army time to collect itself and attack the Union at the Battle of Fair Oaks or Seven Pines. Now, Joe Johnson was horribly wounded and taken out of command. The army sat there. The Union Army, McClellan's, could look at Richmond, seeing the spires. Well, for one day, there was a general by the name of Smith. He proposed to do nothing. So Jeff Davis, president of the Confederacy, realized we've got a real problem and we've got to get rid of this Union Army. He put in his military advisor, who was Robert E. Lee. That was the third man in the Confederate hierarchy of generals. Robert E. Lee took command of the army, basically changed the army to the name we know it today, the Army of Northern Virginia. They attacked the Union Army, Lee's army. Basically, they lost each battle, but every time they fought, McClellan backed up. And Lee followed them all the way to the last battle, which was Malvern Hill, which was a horrible battle for Lee, but again, McClellan backed up. McClellan then is sitting down on, he changed his base, and that was what he said, but basically he backed up and he's doing nothing. Another Union Army under John Pope comes down from Washington, and they are going to take Richmond. Lee realizes that McClellan is going to do nothing, turns his back on McClellan, and marches to defeat, basically in the same place First Manassas was fought, the Battle of Second Manassas. McClellan slowly moves his troops up in support. They did very little support. It is another miserable battle for the Union, sending the Union Army into the fortifications around Washington, D.C. Pope was cashier. That means he was fired. Lincoln had no choice but to put McClellan back in command. McClellan, in a very short time, got that army, the army now called the Army of the Potomac, back in shape. They started to follow Lee. Lee thought that army was almost beyond repair. He is going to attack Maryland and hopefully Pennsylvania. He goes up and he issued what was famously called Lost Order 191, where he divides his army in front of the Union Army, part of it going under Jackson, taking Harper's Ferry. The other part goes to South Mountain. McClellan gets these orders, sees what Lee is doing, and tries to attack him again. McClellan moves slowly that Harper's Ferry falls. But the Union wins the Battle of South Mountain, and Lee backs up to the small town of Sharpsburg on Antietam Creek. They have a battle there, the bloodiest battle in the war, bloodiest single day, called Antietam by the north, Sharpsburg by the south.